So this week, to celebrate my vampire romance series, My Blood Approves, I asked people to ask me any questions if they had any questions about the saga, because it's been over now for about 5 years. And so now I am going to just go through. I've got my iPad here, and I'm going to go through Facebook and Instagram and everything and just answer as many of your questions as I can. So let's jump in. So the first question, if you had to pick yourself, who would you pick, Jack or Peter? And for me personally, if I had to pick between the two of them, I would pick Jack. Yeah, I mean, I always loved Jack. I did. But if I honestly had to pick, like, from the whole series, I would actually probably go with Ezra. So, yeah. Who do you envision as Jack? And when I wrote the books, I didn't actually have, like, a specific person in mind. It was kind of like I mean, it had, like, a face, but it wasn't, like, a person's face, like a real person's face. So I didn't have anyone exactly in mind, but like I said in my Dreamcast video that I think Liam Hemsworth would do a really great job with Jack. So yeah. This question is, would you consider bringing the series to the screen? I absolutely would. Like, I am totally 100% for this being any kind of, like, TV show, movie, anything like that. I haven't had any offers on it. I think a part of it is, especially when this came out, there's, like, a whole bunch of other vampire books coming out, and there's a bunch of vampire movies, and some of them did really well, and some of them didn't, and then I think it just kind of, like, hit peak and it was like oversaturated. But I think vampires are one of those things that's cyclical where it always comes in and out. And then there's stuff like the Vampire Diaries and Interview with the Vampire. They didn't get their movie until like 20 years after the books had been published. So I definitely think there's still potential for there to be a movie or a TV show, and I am 100% for it. There just aren't any current plans at this time. Oops. I lost my place. Dang. Okay. This question is, would you ever write a book with these characters again? I don't know. I mean, I have like, I have some ideas potentially, but I don't want you guys to get excited because it's so like nuggety that I don't know if it'll ever come to fruition. Because the thing about vampires is they're immortal, so I can set books in any decade, you know, I can go forward or backward and have like stories that I can do. So I've kind of thought about it, but I definitely think that I will not be having any more stories where any of the core characters are main characters. Like, you're not going to see a book with Milo, Alice, or Jack, or Peter, or anything like that as a main character again. So, yeah, maybe I would not, hold my breath for it, though. I've got a bunch of other stuff that I want to do first, but maybe. This question is spoilers. There may be some spoilers questions, and, because I'm just kind of going to go through, I will just say spoiler beforehand, and you can just kind of, skip ahead, and I'll leave spoiler on the screen for the whole time I'm talking about the spoiler. So that's how we're going to do that. So this spoiler question is, at any point did you think of having Alice end up with Peter? And how did you come to the decision of having Peter move on once he found peace with Elise's death? I did not envision Alice with Peter ever. That was, I don't know, he never, I guess, well, that's not totally true. I will say, when it was very, very, very first outlining the story, before I even had written any words, I'd considered having Peter be the one, but as I was even writing it, I liked Jack more. I just did. And I liked Jack for Alice. I felt like that Alice was really depressed and uncertain, and just having someone who could be like a cheerleader for her was more important than someone who was kind of pushing her away all the time. So that's why I went with Jack. That's why I like Jack. I just do. But so yeah, ever since the very roughest stage, I knew that she was going to end up with Jack. And as for Peter, that was kind of, yeah, I've been working on how to give Peter a happy ending for a while, because it was hard to do, because he had his one true love, and if Alice is picking with Jack, what's Peter gonna do? And so I wanted to reunite with him with Elise. And so that was where that really came from, and that's why I wrote the novella, to kind of set it up. And so I knew, I think, since after the end of Fate, that this was how it was going to end. I mean, there were some, like, obviously I only had broad strokes of, like, the 5th book, but the big points that I hit in the book, with, about Jack and Alice getting married, and Peter and Elise, that whole storyline, I knew that was going to be in the final book. So yes, I knew for a while. End of spoiler. This question is, what are these books about? Because someone has read my other series and not this one. So these are, it's a vampire romance series, and it's about a teenage girl in Minneapolis who runs into a family of vampires, and she just becomes really involved in their lives. I mean, that's basically it. This one is one of my more, I would say, Monster of the Week series, where each book kind of has, there's an overlaying arc that goes through the whole storylines about, you know, love and mortality and stuff like that, but each story kind of has like its own big bad that I take care of, and then it moves on to the next one. Where a lot of my other stories are very much, they're serial, and this one is more like, so each kind of has each book has a different quest basically, but they're just kind of, they're fun. I took a lot of inspiration from like things like Lost Boys and stuff like that, and it's just I can't think of anything else that I took inspiration from. A lot of John Hughes movies, a lot of you know, that kind of thing, and I just wanted to make a fun book about vampires, and so I did. Okay, so this question is, when you put Swear to the side and stated that you weren't ready to finish it, where was that coming from? Was it something with the series that you didn't sit right with you? Were you burnt out with the series and wanted to wait until your perspective was fresh? Just always been curious about that. So for you that didn't know, most of the series I wrote between 2008 and 2010, pretty back to back, and I published them all like in 2010 and 2011. And I had planned on putting Swear out, writing Swear and putting out right after Wisdom, but I hadn't written it yet when I started publishing. And when I started publishing, I got a lot of reviews. There were a lot of people who really loved the book and really positive, but I also got some incredibly scathing reviews. And I was self-publishing, I didn't have a publishing house, and I was like kind of like a newbie author, and I hadn't actually had that many people read my books before, and I was only in my mid-20s. I was just totally prepared for all this hate. I was just unprepared, and I was overwhelmed. And so then whenever I sat down to write the book, all I could hear was everything that everyone hated about it. And the problem that I was really running into is a lot of the things that people hated about it were things that other people loved about it. You know what I mean? I mean, there are genuine criticisms to the books, and I definitely have some, and there's some problematic elements that I would not write today. But then there was also some that was just violent and really hurtful, I guess is the best way to put it. And I'm not attacking the people who reviewed it or not, and their opinions on it. That's not what I was coming from. I'm just talking about how I had to process this. And it took me a while to actually put enough distance between me and those reviews, and to learn how to handle the negative reviews and how to process all that. And that's honestly what it was. And I know that a lot of people were really frustrated. It wasn't anything, it's just I could not deliver a book that would be good and would satisfy the readers that I had if I all I could think about was these, you know, horrible reviews. So that was just part of it, and that was really it. And now I'm in a much better place. I understand. I don't read as many reviews, and I don't take them as personally if I do. A lot of what reviews are, I mean, there can be constructive criticism in there that I can learn and will help me grow as a better writer, but I also need to just separate myself to a degree. It's, you know, it's not just about me. It's not even about me. It's about a product that I made and how someone else interpreted that. And so I have to remove those steps and look at it that way. And it's hard because it's still a personal product, but it's something that you just have to learn and go on with. But I think I've answered that question for too long, so I'm gonna move on. This is just They Wish Letters to Elise is in book form, so I'm going to explain, because this is a good time to do that. So, Letters to Elise is a novella in the My Blood Approved series. Oops, whatever, I'll pick that up in a second. And it's too short for me to publish on its own because it's just a novella. But it is in the back of Swear. It's pretty. There's even like, it's actually really pretty. She did some cool stuff with it. I did, Regina Wamba did the formatting for this, and she did some really cool stuff. So yeah, it's in the back of Swear. So, if you want Letters to Elise in a paperback form, get Swear. That is why Swear is so expensive too. It's my most expensive book, and it's because it's simply the amount of pages on it. Like, I mean, you look, see how much bigger. This is My Blood Proofs. This is Swear. It's huge because it's got 2 books in it, and it's also a big book because I knew it was going to be the last book. So, yeah, that's the deal with Swear. So it's available in ebook on its own, but it's only available in paperback with Letters to Elise is only in Letters to Elise is available in ebook on its own, but it's only available in paperback with Swear because of my limitations with publishing. That's just it. Yeah. This one is what spoiler question. I mean, I don't think it's too spoiler, but she said, why was Milo's happiness so much more important than Alice's when she was the main character? I guess I didn't really feel like it was more important. He is just the most important person to Alice, and she was really depressed a lot too. I mean, I never said she was depressed, but like when I was reading it, it was really obvious to me that she's incredibly depressed. And so I mean, I think I was drawing from my own teenage experience, which I was really depressed, and but I think a lot of times, I mean, for me, which is what I'm drawing from, when you're depressed, it's very hard to like focus on yourself and think about yourself, because like you could never be happy, and you also like kind of like hate yourself, and you're like, well, I don't deserve happiness. And so a lot of times you put your energy into other people, and you see Alice do that a bit with Jack, but she does it a lot with Milo because he's her little brother and she loves him, and that's it. He's just one of the most important people in her life, and so she's gonna always put his happiness, you know, centralized. But also some of the stuff that happens with Milo is also, it's just putting bumps in Alice's journey too, you know, trying to make, because you have to throw terrible things at your characters, otherwise it's a boring book. This question is, I would like to know what you got your inspiration from the series and what made you take the leap to put it on the page. I got my inspiration from a lot of different stuff. I've actually always really been into like vampire fiction since I was a kid. I read, you know, Dracula and Interview with the Vampire when I was pretty young, and I just really liked vampires always. I loved that vampire episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark and stuff like that. And so then when the vampire craze kind of was taking off in the early 2000s, yeah, I was into it. I was reading, you know, I read Stephanie Meyer, I read Rochelle Mead, I read Melissa De La Cruz, I read Claudia Gray. I know I'm forgetting some. There were a lot of vampire books out. The PC and Kristen Cast. God, who else am I forgetting? Like I know there was a lot at the time, and so I really liked them, and so I definitely drew inspiration from. Oh, and Vampire Diaries, Vampire Diaries, True Blood. See, there was a lot, and yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely, I drew inspiration from them and from all the vampire stuff that I loved. But I'd always been really into vampires since I was a little kid, and I remember I would stay late at night thinking about like how vampires could work, like how they would be possible. And the way that I designed my vampires is actually based on the theory that I came up with when I was like 12 years old, laying in bed, and I couldn't sleep, and I was thinking about Interview with the Vampire. I was like, well, how could vampires be real? And so it's the way, the logic that I have for my vampire world, like for like how the sun affects them and how they survive and what they could eat and all that kind of thing. Most of the rules that I have for my vampires were things that I have been thinking on since I was about 12 and kind of working on. So yeah, that's where it comes from. This is going to be another spoilery question. So, well, I don't know. Is it a spoiler? It's going to be a spoiler. I'm going to call this a spoiler question. So, spoiler. This question is, have you considered doing a spin-off series with Peter as the male lead? And no, I have not. And that's partially because I can only, with the way the book ends, I can only do a prequel series, and I kind of feel like I already mined it. I did the prequel novella. I've talked about it. He spent a lot of times just kind of like being depressed and fighting in wars and moping and stuff like that. So it's not like I like Peter, but I feel like I've told his story to completion. I don't think I have anything more to add. Yeah, that's basically it. I don't have anything interesting to say about it, and so I think it'd be boring, and I don't want to do that. So this question is from someone who hasn't read the series yet, and they said, I want to know what the biggest difference or what makes My Blood Approved stand out from other vampire series like Blue Bloods, Twilight, Vampire Diaries, and others. So I definitely think that there are similarities in the way a lot of these start. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, it's teenage girls gets involved with vampires, you know, kind of thing. I think that I think there's some pretty obvious comparisons to make. I mean, like Vampire Diaries, she's torn between two vampire brothers. You know, like in Twilight, Edward's got his whole vampire family. But I think the differences are basically the way the characters are different, the way I treat them, the situations they go in. I mean, they could all, like, a lot of them could inhabit the same world, but I do have, like, different rules for vampires and stuff like that, what they can do and what they can't do. But I think that my characters are a bit, more fun, I guess. I think that Jack definitely doesn't take himself as seriously as a lot of the other vampire leads. He can be a little immature. I made like conscious decisions that there were, like, I felt like one thing that I didn't like about a lot of the vampire literature I read is that you have a vampire who is like 3,000 years old or 100 years old or whatever it is, and but he looks 17, so it's okay that he dates a 17-year-old girl, even though he's like, his maturity level is completely off the charts, different from hers. And so what I did with my series is their maturity is very much tied into how long they've been a vampire and how old they were when they turned. So Jack is fairly immature, and I did that on purpose because I wanted him to be at the same maturity level as Alice. And because so many times it's like, you know, they're way more mature, but I think that, you know, yeah, I wanted the maturity levels to be similar. And Peter is actually a lot more mature, but he's still, you know, some immature moments because of the way that he's constrained to his physical age, and so that was just, I mean, these are just like small things, but that's some of the stuff that I did. I tried to make conscious decisions about stuff that I had seen, that I about stuff that I read and had seen and that I liked, and stuff that I felt like didn't make sense. Even if it was a trope. But yeah. So I guess that's what I will say. I mean, but there's a lot of good books, and yeah, you're gonna see some similarities, but I think they ultimately stand up on their own, and they go their own path, and yeah. This question about My Blood Proofs is, will you be releasing the series as hardcovers at some point? And I think maybe I will, actually. It's something that I was not able to do because of the way that they're self-published. There wasn't an option for hardcover, but now there seems to be more of an option. So I'm looking into it a bit and trying to figure out how to do it. But I think potentially, yeah, that I could do hardcover, especially if people want them. This question is, where can I buy them? They're available because they're self-published. They're not going to be as readily available in bookstores. I do think that some bookstores, if you go in there and talk to a bookshop seller, they will be able to order them. But primarily, this way is to get them online through Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I have links, you know, on my website, so you can always check out my website, and I'll get you any links to any of my books. And my website is hawkingbooks.com. So here's a few questions in one question, but I'm gonna like answer them all. How is it writing within the current world instead of building your own world? Do you think your writing has improved since the series, and were you worried about jumping onto the very popular vampire world that was present during the time that these were published? So let's start with the last one first. Was I worried? And I said, yeah. I mean, I chose to write about vampires both because I liked them and because they were popular. But then the market got so oversaturated that I did realize that, like, no publisher was going to want to publish it just because we're at, like, the peak and we're on the way down, you know, at the time, which was 2009, 2010. And, but, yeah, I mean, so I didn't worry about it. But I wrote them because I liked them and I had fun doing it. So, I mean, sometimes you have to just write what you want to write too. Do you think your writing has improved since the series? It definitely has. I think my writing has improved a lot. I also think that there were some problematic elements that I didn't realize. There's a lot of like weird, like dumb body shaming stuff, because that's what I had internalized, and I was hating my body, and so my characters were like always like, and you don't realize, I mean, I never made a conscious effort because I would never want to do anything that was harmful like that, but there's internalized stuff that you don't realize that you sometimes put out, and so that stuff like that is a bummer. I also feel like I was really timid about writing diverse books and adding different characters. I was like, it'll be easy if I just write all white characters, I can't be accused of writing, you know, a person of color the wrong way. So then I was hesitant to put them in because then I couldn't, but then, you know, just having a whitewashing book. So the biggest things, I mean, there's some overall like writing styles, because I think it can be clunky and run on at times. There's some overall writing style changes that I would do now if I wrote it, but the biggest things are just I would change some problematic elements, and I would definitely make a more diverse cast. So, but you live and learn. You when you know better, you do better. So, how was it writing within the current world instead of building your own? It was fun. It was fun. I mean, because I very much, this one I set in Minneapolis and Minnesota. I live in Minnesota and I love the cities and stuff like that. So, it was a lot of fun. I liked doing it. I got to use so much pop culture references. That's always fun for me, and I got to just, and it's also great because it's trying to figure out how to, because I was writing about places and things that I loved, and so I was trying to figure out how to put all these things together that I love, and it was, yeah, it's fun, and it is I liked it. I mean, I'll definitely do it more in the future. I'm having a hard time writing contemporary fiction right now because of just, I feel like frustrated with the contemporary world right now. So, but you know, I probably will again in the future. This is a question: if you would rewrite it, what would you change? I kind of answered that. Are they bad vampires or are they good? Where is the history is located and what time? So it is, I mean, there's good vampires and bad vampires, I would say. The main ones are primarily, you know, good. And it's located in Minnesota I mean, I actually set it in a time, I think it takes place between like 2009 and 2015, something like that. So, just got a couple more questions. And this one is, I love this saga. Will you bring more books to Brazil? Yes, I would like to. I would always love to have more books in Brazil. It kind of, yeah. So this one is a bit of a spoiler again. So, spoiler. This question is, do you think if Jane had lived and turned, she would have acclimated well to being a vampire, or would her addictive personality just made her kind of blood crazy? I always thought she'd make a good vampire, but I'd be interested what your take on moral Jane would be. Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't actually really like toy with the idea of her too much becoming a vampire. I think she would have been a good vampire. I think she would have had a rough transition period, though. I think that with her addictive personality and stuff like that. And I also, Alice and Milo had easier transitions because their father was a vampire, so they kind of like already had it in their blood. But since Jane didn't have that, she would have had a more typical difficult transition. And so that would have been part of it. So I think she would have been rough at first, but if she could survive that first rough period, I think she would have been a good vampire. And I think that she would have had fun. She probably would have been friends with like Olivia and Violet and stuff. And that would have been kind of cool. Yeah. I struggled with her character a lot because I think when I first started writing her, I kind of wrote her shitty, like I was mean to her. I think that Alice was mean to her, I think. But I also feel like that was part of what Alice was. And so when you're reading Jane, realize that Alice is a bit of an unreliable narrator, especially in the earlier books. But as Alice matures and gets happier, she starts to able to understand that Jane is just a person, you know? So end of spoiler. Would you ever write another novel or novels in this world in general, even if unrelated or with new characters? Yeah, I mean, definitely, I definitely think I'll write out vampires again, and so I'd likely probably keep it in the same world. Whether or not I keep it in the same family, I don't know. I don't think so, but they might bump into each other. But vampires, yeah, they are fun to write about. They just are. So, yeah. So I think that was the end of all my questions. I mean, there were some really pretty fun ones in there. Yeah, thanks to everyone who left a question, and thanks to everyone who's been making the My Blood Proves week so fun. It's been so great seeing what you guys. So I know so many of you guys love this series, and I do too. And it's weird because like when you publish a book and you put it out, then it kind of feels like it's just done, but it's not. I mean, people are still reading it, and I'm still enjoying it, and I'm glad that you guys are too. I still have some stuff going on, so make sure that you check out my posts and see. I'm also going to have a lot more stuff next week because next week's theme week is The Hollows, and I know a lot of you really love The Hollows, so I'm excited for the stuff that I have coming up then. And yeah, so just stay tuned, and thank you. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe.